This is the King Country Rural Roundabout, brought to you in association with the Ruapehu Rural Support Trust. Phone 0800 787 254. And The Trunk, 88 FM, homegrown right here in Taumarunui.
And this week on the show, I'll be talking to Sirma Karapeeva. She's the CEO of the Meat Industry Association. Also, we'll be talking to Melvin Forlong about sheep poo. And finally, Nick Street will update us on the Federated Farmers events that are happening throughout the Ruapehu district. And it's my pleasure now to welcome Sirma Karapeeva to the show. Sirma is the Chief Executive Officer of the Meat Industry Association. Welcome, Sirma.
Well, good morning, Brian. How are you?
Excellent. Not bad at all. Now, quite a few things to talk about, but what I want to do is go through a couple of things. Firstly, you took over, didn't you, as the CEO? You were appointed in April, right at the start of the lockdown. How was that?
Yes. That was quite a very interesting time to take over the role as Chief Executive. And mind you, this is my first Chief Executive role. So, baptism by fire, 100%. But having said that, I think, at a time of crisis, there certainly is a lot of opportunity. And with COVID-19 and the lockdown, we saw the opportunity of the sector coming together and working collaboratively, both farmers and processors, so across the farm gate, and also with government. And I think while it was a pretty intense several weeks, it filled me with a lot of confidence that the sector is very resilient and very nimble and able to weather the storm. So, good way to start in the role.
Absolutely, as you say, baptism by fire. But prior to that, you worked with Trade and Policy team, didn't you, for quite some time?
Yeah, well, I've been with the Meat Industry Association for about 5 years as their Trade and Economic Manager. And prior to that, I had about maybe 15 odd years with government, predominantly in the trade policy and negotiation space. So very much with that international focus, looking at setting the international rules to support New Zealand exports overseas and make it easier for New Zealand to trade, to remove those tariff barriers, to remove those regulatory barriers that impact on our products, including our primary sector product. And so moving from government into the Meat Industry Association was the logical next step,
right? Yes.
To actually see how the frameworks and the trade deals that government negotiates, how they resonate with industry and how industry seeks to use them. So it was a natural step for me, and I've enjoyed every moment of it.
One of the things that stuck out for me is looking at the regulatory things that you do, like animal welfare, biosecurity, food safety, quality and market access. A lot of people probably don't know a lot about that, do they? And especially around biosecurity, which I find a little fascinating because that's a whole program on its own, to be honest with you. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, our regulation here in New Zealand really is the benchmark, or it's the foundation on which we trade. So whether it is biosecurity, whether it is animal welfare, and certainly food safety, that really is the platform that we base our reputation as producers of high quality, safe food for export around the world. And so the work that we do at the MIA is very much to work in partnership with government to make sure that the regulatory settings are based on solid science, on good risk assessment, they're fit for purpose, and they're not so prescriptive as to inhibit innovation, which drives productivity in the business place, but also, that they're credible and they can be sold to offshore markets for that reputational dimension. So biosecurity, I mean, we are an island, and biosecurity is hugely important to New Zealand. COVID in a way was a biosecurity issue, and we were very fortunate that the government moved quickly to shut the borders and implement quite strict measures to try and contain the spread of it. But you can imagine if this was an animal disease or a plant disease, as we've had in the past, it can be quite devastating for the primary sector. And so this is an area that we're very focused on working with government to make sure that the settings at the border are strong and they can manage those those issues as they come in.
It was interesting. I was reading a little bit about that, and one of the things that struck me, and I was quite surprised, was that MIA has no regulatory power over any individual processor, which
we don't.
Yeah, and I found that rather, I don't know. It was to me, well, hang on a minute, what happens here, and what does happen?
Well, you see, I guess this is the value of the organisation to a certain extent. It is a voluntary trade association. So our members are members because they see the value and the work that we do.
Yep.
And therefore they're happy to pay their membership fee and fund us to continue working. So like you said, we're not subject to a piece of regulation like some other industry good bodies. For example, Beef and Lamb New Zealand, they have a levy under the Commodities Levy Act. We have to work really hard to service our members to add value to their business. So in a way, I guess it's tough, but it also helps us to focus our mind on the things that really matter to our members and to deliver on the issues that our members feel are where they can come together collectively to shift the dial for the entire sector as opposed to just for an individual company. So a lot of the regulatory space, the trade and market access space, that is all pretty competitive. So if we unlock issues for one company, we essentially unlock it for everyone. And so we even the playing fields and provide opportunity for all of the New Zealand producers and exporters in the meat sector to perform and to export and to maintain their profitability and viability.
And I understand that you do have a good membership too, because a lot of farmers, a lot of people are on board with what you're doing, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, we've got about 41 member companies, which might not sound like a lot, but if you look at the percentages, that essentially represents 99.9% of domestic production and export.
Wow.
So we have all the big New Zealand meat companies, the big producers like Ansco, AFCO, Silver Fern Farms, Alliance, Greenlee, you name it. We've got those big companies as our members, and they're both the meat producers and the exporters. So I feel that for a voluntary trade association, we are actually very representative of our sector, and that gives me, I guess, a lot of strength in presenting an industry view, because I know that we've got the support of our members.
And I think the other thing too, New Zealand proudly upholds some of the world's highest animal welfare standards, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I think in terms of animal welfare and in terms of food safety, we're probably seen as the benchmark in terms of the regulatory settings. We're certainly very active in the international sphere to set those international standards around food safety in particular. And we're recognised globally for that. So, as I said before, that really gives us a very good foundation to build our reputation as producers of safe, quality red meat products.
Yeah, absolutely. And then food safety, of course, comes into that. That's important as well. And I was quite interested when I looked at that. I there was some stuff in there that I never knew about. And I thought, well, you guys are onto it. You're really, really onto it in that respect. And you've, again, made sure, haven't you? And you do make sure that everything, all the boxes are ticked, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, we have to. We are a hugely regulated industry. We have government oversight at production sites. We have a whole bunch of compliance that we have to meet in order to be able to produce and export our product. And without meeting those requirements, it would be incredibly difficult to position our products on the global market. And, for New Zealand, export, or at least for our sector, export is very important. We export over 90% of what we produce, and we export that to over 120 countries around the world. And that's really because in New Zealand, we're very efficient producers of red meat.
Yep.
We've got the natural climate to do that. We've got healthy soils, healthy animals, healthy air, and all the inputs that are necessary to produce good quality sheep and beef. And also we've got quite a small domestic population to consume all that. So we've always been an export focused market, and because of that, we've made sure that whatever we do domestically is 100% right, so that we cannot be tripped up in those international markets.
Yeah, and the stats, I was amazed when I saw. I was reading. I think it was was 9 point something billion dollars comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of money.
Well, we are the second largest goods exporter. So dairy obviously is much bigger than us.
Yeah.
But after dairy, we red meat and co-product. And last year we exported $9.3 billion worth of red meat and co-products. And then if you add wool on top of that, that's another 500,000 or so. So we're pushing the $10 billion mark for exports in total. Which is significant, and certainly now looking at the post-COVID sort of recovery period that New Zealand is entering into, we're very focused on playing our role in that and continuing to export and continuing to bring all that export revenue back to New Zealand. Because when you look at it, collectively, processing, exporting and sheep and beef production, we as a sector, we've created over 92,000 jobs,
right?
Both directly and indirectly, and we contribute about $12 billion worth of value add to New Zealand. So that's the wages that people get, the spend, the on-flow spend, and other services. So we are certainly playing a significant role in the economy, and we want to continue to do that. And we're taking active steps to make sure that we can support New Zealand as it recovers from COVID and gets back on an even keel.
And some of those statistics, I was looking at equating it down to the individuals, about $3,000, wasn't it? It was a massive amount.
It's about 3,300, I think, per household. Household. Of income that comes, from the sector.
Yes.
Which is significant. I think the total sum is about 4.6 billion of household income. And when you think about it, we contribute about 5% of national employment. So quite a significant level there. And then you take that down to the regions, where in some regions we're the largest single employer. So certainly very important to regional New Zealand, and very important to providing economic and employment opportunities for many people up and down the country.
And that's the thing, I think, that a lot of people don't know that. And it's a huge amount when we look at it at the end of the day. And one of the things that has impressed me over the few weeks that we've been doing the Rural Roundabout is that one thing that comes out, and it comes out more than once, is that we don't grain feed. All of our meat, pretty much 99.9% of it, is grass-fed, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's right. And that is, and for us, for New Zealand, I think that's a real point of difference. I acknowledge that there are other countries around the world that claim to be grass-fed.
Yep.
But I think in New Zealand, we can really put our hand on our heart and say that, as you said, 99.9% of a product is grass-fed. And that is because we've got the natural attributes to sustain that type of production system, and it is sustainable, and it is in step with the notion of environmental sustainability and quality. So it's something that we're very focused on, and something that we're working to, to define those attributes more clearly for consumers around the world. So I don't know whether you've picked up on the website, but we've launched a program to look at the nutritional value of grass-fed meat, and that's quite a long-term study. I think it'll take a couple of years, because it involves a whole lot of people actually experiencing the product and measuring the attributes in their bodies, the way the product is metabolized and the like, so we can have some credible data to explain the nutritional benefit of grass-fed red meat.
Absolutely.
And I think that part of the story is going to become more important as people around the world are looking for more natural, healthy, sustainable food to consume.
And I think that's the thing. It was a nice segue, because I was going to talk about that. With the COVID and so forth, people are looking for alternatives, aren't they? Healthy alternatives.
I think so. I think they definitely are, and we've been picking up some feedback from various markets where the consumers are actively taking steps to look for products that is better for their health, because they're dealing with a health crisis with COVID-19.
Sure.
And certainly red meat, naturally produced red meat like New Zealand's grass-fed product, is stacking up in terms of those consumer preferences.
Something just a little different, something I didn't know, was that the exports of halal meat from New Zealand began in the 70s. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, we've had a very long history of halal production.
yeah.
And it goes back. I guess it goes back to the subsidies
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s and 80s when we had a lot of product, a lot of sheep meat, with very few markets to export that product to. Back in the 70s, of course, we were predominantly exporting sheep meat to the United Kingdom.
Yes.
And that's a market that can only take so much product, and we had a lot, a lot. I think it was 80 million heads of sheep at one point in time. So we were looking for other markets to export this product to and get some sort of economic return, and Iran was the market that was looking for product at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Iran is a Muslim market, and so we had to find a way to service that market with those religious attributes that it required. And the industry came together and put in place a halal processing, slaughtering and processing framework specifically for the Iranian market,
Yep.
which then over a period of time became developed to a more, a more systematic regulatory framework. And now we've got a piece of legislation that's administered by the Ministry of Primary Industries that sets in place the requirements for halal processing in New Zealand for export to all countries around the world that require some, halal credentials for their product. So it was really interesting, and it is quite, I guess it's quite a unique story because you wouldn't, as you say, equate New Zealand to a country that is so focused on halal processing. But, in reality, it is one of those value add bits that the industry has come together, identified a need, and worked very closely with government to put in place a framework to meet that need. And, today, I think nearly 50%, maybe just below that, of our total product is halal certified. It brings in about $3 billion worth of export revenue. And it's not just for Muslim markets, it's actually for all markets where there is a Muslim community that is looking for that type of product.
Oh, yeah, look, excuse me, I was fascinated I when I saw the stats there and looked at it, and I thought, wow, way back into the 70s. And we've developed that, as you say, we've developed that now, and we're up to about 50% of that, which is really, really interesting. Now, I want to just move on a little bit. You've got a fairly solid investment portfolio too, haven't you?
Yeah, well, we've been doing a lot of investment, research and development aimed at lifting productivity and mitigating risk in the processing plants. And so we have a solid portfolio of projects that look from food safety issues through to robotics and automation, through to packaging and also a certain amount of product development. And this is all part of the suite of areas that we take in the pre-competitive space on behalf of our members to help them fine-tune their processing and extract a little bit more profitability and productivity from their operations.
When we talk about the environment and we talk about sustainability, I see that the red meat sector is built around extensive low-impact grassland grazing. Now, that's also extremely important, isn't it?
Well, it is. And as I said, that's one of the big prongs of our story, the red meat story, is to educate, people around the world and to a certain extent in New Zealand about our sustainability and environmental credentials. Now, I think everyone in the sector acknowledges that we've got a role to play in managing the environment better and addressing, global climate change. There's no question about that. And we're certainly investing a lot of effort and projects in trying to get the right tools to change behaviour where behaviour needs to be changed so that we can continue to meet those environmental outcomes and objectives right along the supply chain.
And again, it's something that you're constantly focused on, isn't it?
Oh, well, we have to be. I don't think climate change and sustainability is going away anytime soon. And if we're not focused on this, And if we're not performing, I think we'll just lose our credibility and our social license. So, as I said, we are very focused on it, and we are investing to improve performance and to improve performance in a way which is, sustainable and makes a real change.
And the other thing too, the new research that's being done is continual as well, isn't it? And I think I was looking at something that talked about the value of New Zealand's red meat sector as the industry sort of launches into the general election manifesto. That's that interested me, to be honest.
Yeah, so we commissioned two pieces of independent research early in the year. One of them looked at the economic contribution of the sector, both on farm and processing sector to New Zealand, to get a sense of the dollar amounts that we contribute into the economy.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned some of those, 12 billion industry value add and 4.6 billion of household income across New Zealand. But then we also thought, okay, well, that's fine. That tells the economic story of how important and the role that we play in the economy. But what about the social story?
Yeah.
And so we commissioned a second piece of research that complements the economic piece, and that was the social contribution. And here we were really interested in looking at what is the social impact should the sector contract, should there be some, heavens forbid, closures of processing plants in the regions. And that's where we found out that, in fact, we supported those 92,000 jobs up and down the country, about 5% of national employment, huge contribution to some of the regions which rely heavily on sheep and beef farming and processing, and then the flow-on impacts in terms of the social services in the communities, be it education or health services, you name it. So those two pieces of research really give quite a holistic view of the role that we have to play in the sector. Hopefully gives governments and other decision makers some credible evidence that they can consider when they're making political decisions about new regulatory approaches and frameworks. And so, and you mentioned the manifesto. Well, the manifesto is really the blue. We call it manifesto for sure, but essentially it is a blueprint for partnership. It is a document that is produced jointly by the Meat Industry Association and Beef and Lamb New Zealand, and it outlines our key priorities as a sector over the next 5 years, where we're focusing our efforts, what we're doing to chart our course, and what we're doing collectively to deliver on the signals that we're hearing in the market and from government. But at the same time, it also talks about areas where we think we can partner up with government to more readily achieve both sector objectives as well as government objectives. So, regulation is very much an enabler if it's done right, but it can be a hindrance if it's not. So that's clearly an area where we want to work very constructively with government to set the right rules, the right compliance framework to enable our sector to continue to contribute to New Zealand.
And look, finally, I want to just very briefly touch on the fact that I think it was in the middle of June, wasn't it? The sector welcomed the announcement of the launch of free trade, the FTA negotiations between the UK and New Zealand. That's got to be a biggie too.
Oh, look, certainly. Trade to all parts of the world are very, very important to our sector. As I mentioned, we export over 90% of our products to, over 120 countries. And so we're very supportive of the government's trade agenda. We're very supportive of the free trade negotiations that have been negotiated to date. And as you mentioned, the UK New Zealand FTA has just been launched.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that very closely. And the UK is a very important market for chilled lamb products, specifically chilled lamb legs at peak demand times in the UK. So we are a complementary supplier into the UK market when their production is probably not quite able to meet domestic demand at, say, Easter or Christmas time. So we can come in and provide the consumer with high quality chilled lamb meat. So the consumer benefits from having access to best,
Mm.
best in time or best year round product. If we can, if the government can secure a trade agreement that stabilizes those trade relationships and makes it more stable and clear for us in terms of our exports, it'll be fantastic, and we're very supportive of that.
Look, absolutely. Sirma, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. I could go on for hours because we've just skimmed across the surface, haven't we?
We have. There really is a lot going on in our sector, and the one message that I think I'd like to leave you and your listeners is, we're an old sector in inverted commas. We've been around for a long time, but there's nothing old or staid about it. This is a very dynamic and vibrant sector, and we're constantly looking at improvements and innovation to keep, being dynamic and to keep responding to those market signals, both here in New Zealand and internationally. So, reach out, have a look at our websites, at our information, and if there's any further questions or whatever, I'm more than happy to continue chatting.
You're listening to the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with the Ruapehu Rural Support Trust. Phone 0800 787 254. On the trunk, 88 FM, homegrown right here in Taumarunui.
And it's my pleasure to welcome Melvin Forlong from Fernleaf Romneys near Ofongo to the show. Melvin, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you, I understand, were one of the earlier breeders, stud breeders, involved in trying to breed sheep that are resistant to worms. And I mean, I know you've been there for a very long time, haven't you?
Oh, we sure have, yeah. Well, we started off with other things. We sort of had to sort the facial eczema thing out, 30 or 40 years ago. And then we another guy enthused me of doing something about parasites because he said it was possible. So, yeah, no, we've pushed it quite hard.
Right. So what sort of problems did you come across? Tell us about the process.
Well, the process at the start was we didn't really know where we were going in the early days, but we started taking feces samples from lots of different sheep and found that some were had a higher level worm count than others, and then we started tracking it back to the sires, and we found that some family lines had a very much lower worm count than others. So that's basically where it came from, just hard data, just collecting the shit samples and getting them analysed, and then breeding from the ones with low worm egg counts, all within the stud Romney scene.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, I understand your approach has been unique in that you've sort of placed an emphasis on the different types of poos, if you like, haven't you?
Yeah.
For the want of a better word. Tell us a bit about that. How does that kind of work?
Yeah, well, we came about that through Dr. Clive Dalton, an old researcher from Ruakura and Wata Wata Research Station, got me interested in that in the early 2000s. And he and a mate or two had established a monitoring thing where the marble-producing sheep marbles were called 1, and what we called hand grenades with a little bit more moisture in them, they were called 2s, and so on through, we called them, plops and runs or something. We had these 5 titles that we gave to them, and we've sort of had a big, because we've done the field days for the last 15 years.
Right, yep.
And we would have a big thing up on the wall, a picture of marbles and a picture of hand grenades and a picture of plops and slops, and number them. And the key to it for us was to concentrate on the marble-producing sheep and the what we call the hand grenade sheep, because in the early days particularly we found that sheep that were shitting those kind of feces had on average the lowest worm count. Doesn't mean you didn't get the odd one that was a marble maker that had a high worm count.
Right.
The same way as you'd get a scoury one that would have a 0 because it obviously scoured it out of its system. But we put a tremendous emphasis on that in the early days. And a lot of it was based on a guy called Dr. His name's completely gone from me. But he did a lot of work at Armidale in New South Wales, Australia.
Right, yep.
And he said it was a waste of time trying to breed for resistance to parasites if you didn't take the moisture content into consideration. So if we got a sheep with 1,000 eggs per gram and it was a marble producer, we called it 1,000 eggs per gram. If it was a hand grenader, we called it 2,000. And if it was a plopper, we called it 3,000. So on through to the moisture level that it was in there. So instead of getting one that was a runny shit and had a low worm count, that would immediately it just made it more relevant, and I think it's probably got a lot to do with the bulk of it.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, does that sound too confusing?
No, not at all. I'm starting to get the picture here.
Yeah,
and,
well, I was actually doing it before I heard of these guys.
Okay,
Before I heard of this system. Dr. Leo Legendre was the guy's name. He was actually an American guy who worked on parasites for 20 years at Armidale in New South Wales.
Yep.
But I observed just in a pile of mess in the yards, for example, that if they were marbles, they were very much more concentrated. But if the more runny they got, the greater the bulk. So therefore, when you're actually taking a sample from them to get it analysed, and you've got a gram of shit of marbles is very much more concentrated, and therefore could tolerate a higher worm level than one that was runny. It seemed to be logic to me.
Yeah, okay. I'm fascinated now because historically I sort of understand farmers have relied on drenches to combat worms, haven't they? But there have been a lot of problems around worms becoming resistant to a lot of the drenches.
Majorly so, yeah.
Yeah. So again, how did you combat that? By what process did you go through?
Well, the process we went through in the early days, we would take samples from all of our young sheep coming through, ewes and rams, young rams coming through, and we started breeding from the ones that had low worm counts, and in the early days with the ewes, breeding from the ones that had low worm egg counts. Anything that either was scoury or had a high worm count, we just moved them into the non-registered part of the flock and away from the breeding scheme. And so we concentrated very, very heavily in the early days of never using anything that wasn't either a marble producer or a hand grenader. Yeah.
And that was the way it went. And as you say, a hand grenader or a marble producer gave you a level that you could start to monitor and look at and go, okay, we can work around this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that I have to honour Gordon Levitt in this because he was the guy in North Auckland who enthused me to do it in the first place.
Sure, yep.
He's very well known for what he's done, and the majority of our sires that we have bought in have come from his flock, being low worm egg count sheep from that flock. So he enthused me in the first place, but of course we've used... The majority of the rams we use now are our own ones within our own flock because we've got a reasonable sized flock. We've had 750 stud ewes that gives us a bit of flexibility.
Absolutely. And I guess it became, as time went on, it became important in producing sheep that were genetically resistant to the worms, didn't it?
Yeah, well, again, that came from a guy called Chris Morris, who was at Ruakura for many, many years. Dr. Chris Morris. Unfortunately, he's not with us today because he was a very, very good researcher and a very honourable fellow. And he found that in his research that the resistance was very much more inheritable than resilience. Resilience, they can have as many worms as they like and still go on and do well. And a lot of people are breeding for that, and it's a good thing to do. But we chose the resistance line because we wanted to lower the overall number of parasites getting put back out onto the pasture.
Right. So the resistance became important, and because it does, doesn't it? It does cause potential damage. Whereas by eliminating that the way you've done it with your breed, you kind of have eliminated it, haven't you?
Yeah, well, that's the aim of it. Yeah, and the other thing that we did that I believe has been crucial to it is we run the whole farm at a very, very high stocking rate, and for a long time we were running it at 16 stock units to the hectare, which for a stud farm is just plain ridiculous. But an old guy taught me that many, many years ago, that if you want to find your best stock, you put them under pressure. And you put them under pressure and you find the ones that can handle it and those that can't. And it sounds ruthless, but that's how we did it. We put them under pressure, and it very, very obviously showed up the ones that could do it and those that couldn't. And, of course, a lot of the rams that I bought over the years just can't do it. They just can't handle it at that level.
Yep.
But that's how we've run the whole farm. So if you even drive past the farm today, you'll see that it's very, very short. Not just the drought, it's just that we run it at a very, very high level of stocking rate to find the ones that can handle it and those that can't. And it's on that basis that we sell our rams. So They're not the biggest sheep. In fact, they're quite small and they're quite hard done by. But it seems to be that they go away to other properties and do well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated because I was reading your website and I was doing a bit of research, and the Fernleaf breeding program is aimed at breeding rams and ewes that need less drenching and are more resistant to worms and to facial eczema. That intrigues me.
Yeah,
what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, you look at our property today. We've got 150 young rams that just yesterday we took feces samples from to be analysed, and because that's the basis we sell them on. And out of that 150, I think only 10 of the whole mob have ever had a drench in their lives, and that's come through one of the worst droughts we've ever had, and a very, very high stocking rate. And our ewe lambs have had one drench, because I'm 76 and I got to March and I thought, or end of March, beginning of April, and with all the hassles with lockdown and everything, I said, I don't want to be worried about those ewe lambs, having to check them if there are any that aren't making it, so we just drenched the lot. Now that's the only drench those ewe lambs have had, even though we're running the whole place still at probably 13 or 14 stock units to the hectare. So
you go on.
No, I was just going to say, it makes sense to me that people have just over-drenched and overused it, and we've got generations of stock now that are dependent on the drugs getting poured down their throat to allow them to survive. Most people wouldn't even know which ones have got a good immune system or which ones haven't.
Right.
Nobody would have any idea.
Yeah. And there's the thing, and I think, when I talk about resistance versus resilience, it comes back to, who wants resilient sheep that tolerate worms and scouring and producing, all sorts of things. Yeah. And that's got to be a big thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So when we actually sell our rams, we sell them on the basis of obviously they've been still recorded with SIL, Sheep Improvement Limited, for as long as that's been going, and the predecessor, which was called Animal Plan or something like that, or Sheep Plan or something. But we've been doing that for more than 40 years, so they're all recorded on that. But when people look at them, they want to know what their worm count is, and if they've never been drenched, their worm count will be accurate to what their immune system is able to do. Otherwise, if they've been drenched 6 weeks ago, who knows whether that drench is still actually having an effect in the system or not. But if you've got a line of sheep that have never ever had a drench, well, you are going to know which ones have got a good immune system, which ones haven't, by the worm count.
I was reading, and it's something that I read, and it was quite interesting, was resistance has high heritability. Is that correct?
Well, we've found it to be so. Chris Morris at Ruakura claims that resistance has 28% inheritability factor.
Okay, yeah.
And so, therefore, in 2 generations, you can make considerable gain.
And that's the good thing, because I think, and more and more farmers are finding that and are coming to understand just exactly how the process works, and they're reaching out for it, I understand too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, very, very much so.
Mm.
And we've got a large station in Taranaki that have been buying off for 15 years.
Yes.
And they've never, ever bought our top sheep. They buy a good average sheep from us, that they have more than halved their drenching on their own property. And they're still getting 2 drafts away before Christmas at something like 19 kilograms.
Right.
So the sheep are responding well to less drench. That's how we did it in the first place, was by taking shit samples and by extending the periods of time between drenches.
Yeah. Well,
instead of being 28 days, we went out to 6 weeks, and we slowly increased it till we could afford to perhaps not drench them at all.
Was it trial and error to start with, or?
Oh, heck yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And so, what was the length of time to get to where you are now? Over what, years?
I would say we've got over the last 20 years. We've got to where we are now.
Yep.
Where there'd be hardly there wouldn't be any recorded ewes on the farm that have had more than one drench in their lives.
Right. Yeah.
And the majority of rams that we've had here have never had a drench.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in. I want to stress the point. I don't believe in allowing animals to die. So we monitor them very, very carefully. Always have done.
Yep.
And if we think that a ram is suffering too much, we bring them in regularly. We still do it, although we're doing it less, having to do it less and less in the autumns. But through those critical years, we would bring them in perhaps twice a week even, condition score them, watch them running back to the yards to make sure that barber's pole wasn't devastating them, because that's the hard one to overcome, is barber's pole, because a female barber's pole can lay 5,000 eggs a day. And they can go from looking okay to being devastated by it in a very short time.
Right. Now, another fact that I find interesting is that over the years, a lot of farmers have become suspicious of computer-bred sheep. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that's something that we're putting a lot of emphasis on in about the last 5 years, because some experts in the field have said that you should be able to buy a ram directly off your selling catalogue without ever looking at it. But I think that structural soundness of a sheep is absolutely imperative. And so we actually bring an expert through, an independent expert through, first of all, to go through critically through all our ewes and anything that wasn't structurally sound, with a good rib, a good top loin, a well-placed head that wasn't goose-necked and that had a structurally sound back end, standing up well on his feet, and we still bring that guy through to look at our rams every year and to help us select the ones that we're going to use in our own flock, because we obviously present them the ones that we want to use because of the records, and then he will look at them critically to give us a fair appraisal of that. I think that's absolutely important, because I think there's a lot of structurally unsound sheep on the market in New Zealand.
Right. Now, something I was just reading a minute ago as you were talking there, I found the little piece I wanted to mention is, and I quote, "We have had so much faith in this practice that we now guarantee the feet of our rams for 12 months. Tell me, what does that mean in layman's terms?
It's very possible to buy a sheep that looks sound and through maturity coming, where his feet won't be sound in a short period of time. And so I suppose we gave that guarantee perhaps 20 years ago, and it's always been maintained. If a person isn't happy with a ram that they buy from us, no matter what it is, I will replace it.
Right. Yeah.
So if they buy a sheep, for example, that hasn't got its 2 teeth through, and it's impossible to see whether it's got the correct placement for its teeth to its top gum, and then they're unhappy with it being a little over or a little under or whatever it may be, or anything else that may, perhaps the wool might open up down the middle of the back, or perhaps they might have 1 foot that he goes over on the back of, or a toe that grows exceptionally long, or something like that. For the first 12 months, we will replace that sheep.
See, I mean, that to me is fascinating because, stock that's going out, those rams that are going out, because you stand by your guarantee, and you know that the quality is good. You know that they tick all the boxes, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I actually choose a lot of rams for people.
Uh-huh.
I've got clients north of Gisborne that I choose for, and then we end up usually delivering them. We've got a lot of rams going into the South Island, some of them at a very high price that I choose, and I guarantee people that if I choose a ram for them, I'll spend twice as much time choosing it as they would if they came, because I don't want it to kick back on me and have to give a replacement if they're not happy.
There you go.
Obviously, and we've got people that are paying, many thousands of dollars for them in the South Island that I actually choose them for them. Yeah,
I think that's something that the average person like me doesn't quite get. That these rams are not, dollar a dozen, are they? They're top quality, and the money that you get for those rams makes it all worthwhile at the end of the day. Not only that, but that you're sending out a good ram to wherever it may be going. And I guess that comes back to your guarantee, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. And we actually only sell about a quarter of the rams that we breed.
Right.
So the selection rate is very, very stiff, obviously.
Yeah. How has this whole lockdown business affected you in any way? Has it or not?
Oh, it's made me work twice as hard because I couldn't get any time away from the farm, and it's really, really hard to relax when you're on the farm because you see jobs that need doing everywhere, and my theory at the start was, well, I'm going to take a day off a week and take it easy, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah,
there's always something to do.
There's always something to do, and I don't know how many.
Something bugging me, and it was lovely when lockdown ended and we could go to Hopi Beach and have a few days away where I didn't have to look at all the jobs that need to be done all the time.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because a number of people have said the same thing. It's actually they're quite pleased because they can relax a little bit, and the lockdown sort of created all sorts of problems, and I guess transport was one of the big ones for you. I don't know whether you were sending rams away at that point or not.
No, that wouldn't have been a problem at all. The problem was that with the drought, we had difficulty getting stock into the works, and we waited to get bulls away. They were booked in before Christmas, and we never started getting them away until into March, and that made it very, very difficult for us.
I would imagine.
And they were going through March and April, whereas they should have all been gone in January.
Right.
And it was stuff like that. But if we'd needed to, and in fact we did deliver some stock, and we had a perfectly just reason to be on the road if we're delivering stud stock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When does the sale take place? Is it an ongoing process or is it a set time?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
When does the sale take place? Is it a set time?
Yeah, yes. It starts around the middle of November.
Yep.
And goes through. We sold our last rams in April.
Well, so it's it's over.
Majority of them go out November, December.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the ones that come in a little bit later. Some people don't know where they're heading, and so they wait till they know where they're heading before they actually commit themselves to buying. And they've all got their reasons for what they do.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
A lot of people have a sale on farm sale, so that they can get it all done in a very short time, and that has its merits. But for me, I like to spend time with people, explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, and I couldn't possibly do that to everybody on a sale day.
No,
so we have people pouring through day after day after day, coming and choosing their rams. Yeah.
I think something, and don't laugh, I don't think I'll ever look at poo in the same way again now. It'll be number one, number two, but this one, that one, sloppy, whatever you do.
It's a bit of a joke because at the field days when we were there, my wife does up about 300 little packets of chocolate raisins and gives them away to the children by saying, "Would you like some sheep poo that you can eat?" And the children don't know whether to take the packet or reject it, and some do and some don't. And it just creates quite a bit of fun. But they'll never forget what sheep poo looked like, will they?
They won't indeed. And look, Melvin, it's been fascinating because I mean, I've learned quite a lot and stuff I didn't know, being a townie. But the work and the process that goes into what you're doing is not a 5-minute job, is it? This is years and years of study and developing and training and so forth to get to where you are today.
I will say that we are helping clients to do what we have done, and I would say that we could help them to do it in half the time it took for us to do it.
Right, yep.
Just stuff we've learnt along the way, and how to do it, and how to analyse your use, and where to go from there. And I say to people, don't bother buying an expensive RAM from me and trying to clean up shitty use. It's just not going to work. So they need to select their marble producing and their hand grenade use to start with.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? And really and truly into the future, it's kind of impact farming, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it has to be the way to go. The rate that parasites are building resistance to the drugs is huge. I went to a meeting a while ago where there were probably 200 farmers there, and one particular veterinary service was saying they were finding 6 farms a week with resistance to the triple drench.
Wow.
And that is a major problem that is looming.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what my vets are telling me all the time, is that they have a number of properties on their books now with major problems with resistance, where the drench just isn't working.
Right, so it obviously is something that you're very, very passionate about, very focused on, and it's working for you too,
Oh yeah, very, very, very definitely, yeah.
Melvin, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I do thank you for your time.
Oh, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You're listening to the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with the Ruapehu Rural Support Trust. Phone 0800 787 254 on the Trunk 88 FM, homegrown right here in Taumarunui.
And it's my pleasure now to say a very, very warm welcome and a very good morning to Nick Street. Nick is the chair for Meat and Wool for the Ruapehu Federated Farmers. Nick, welcome.
Good morning, Brian. How's things?
Not too bad, not too bad. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but we're going to sort of talk a little bit to start off with about what's happening on the farm.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. So winter time, basically scanning sort of just been, sheep scanning sort of just been completed, and that's been on the back of a pretty tough autumn for tupping. So results aren't as flash as we would like to see them, but we have had a pretty good period of growth through June, which has really helped out magically. So we've got to deal with what we've got to deal with, but that's where we're at the present, and probably not too far away from sort of ewes being set stocked, and hopefully they can lamb well through the spring.
Yeah. Would that be sort of common right around the area at the moment, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, sort of anecdotally, just talking to vets and scanners and peers and whatnot. Yeah, things are back on last year. We expected this would be the case. We had a pretty significant dry here. Obviously, others were in a far worse position than ourselves. But, we did expect this. And, it's sort of just par for the course, really.
Right. Yep. And that's I guess it's due to the whole current situation around the drought and a whole lot of other factors that come into play there. But look, you've got Okahura Farm, and it's been in the family 110 odd, 111 odd years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a few generations ago.
Yep.
Sort of back in the ballot days. Yeah, that's right.
So what's changed over the years? What progress have you seen? And I'm interested in that because that's a lot of history, and it's been in the family all those years. And I'm sure that over through the century or through the generations, things have changed. You've brought your particular skills to it, or are they ongoing, like handed down to you?
Oh, no, definitely passed on. There's no doubt about that. I mean, from my perspective, I can only really talk about 30, 40 odd years of what I've seen out of 100 and something. But it's look, things are always changing. Technology is always and new advancements are always coming on stream, and I guess we're always looking to look at aspects of those sorts of things. But I guess my grandfather, he always talked about aerial top dressing being the number one game changer for us.
Yep.
Genetics has been huge over the years as well. And look, our programs have changed dramatically over years. Grandfather used to have an Angus stud. Well, that's long gone. My dad used to run a Romney sheep stud. That's long gone. So we're pretty traditional here, but really enjoy the challenge and enjoy what we do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know at the moment one of the big things is the big drive, because you are the local organiser for Feed the Bay, and I think I saw a photo the other day of a whole lot of trucks all loaded up and heading off. How's that going and how's it gone?
Oh, it's been remarkable, Brian. We're look, I'm just firstly so thankful for the local community, town folk and farmers alike. Everyone's gotten behind it. We've managed to pull together 90 odd bales from people, and plus another couple of hundred conventional bales, and we've been able to distribute that through the Hawke's Bay, but also up to the Thames Valley Coromandel as well. They've had a pretty nasty dry as well. So I just it was a good thing for the community to get in behind, and it's there's probably close to $20,000 of value there that we've been able to raise really easily and pull together and do. So it's been awesome, and I was just talking to the Hawke's Bay, one of the Rural Support Trust organisers this morning. They're extremely thankful, and they might return the favour by coming back and buying a whole lot of our fantastic ewe lamb, ewe hoggets next year, because they're gonna need some extra mouths over there. So look, what goes around comes around, and it's been really good for us. It's been magic.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about that too is the whole community's got behind it, not just a few. It's been a total community involvement, hasn't it? Rurally and in town, everybody's got in and done their own little bit. And as you say, 20 grand's worth of hay and whatnot going over there is pretty cool.
No, that's right. No, just even spreading the word. There's been magic, and even there was one particular lifestyle who was able to give one or two bales, and I thought that was a huge contribution. So it's been across the board, and it's been hugely well received.
Absolutely. Now, you're involved with Federated Farmers, with the Ruapehu Federated Farmers. What's happening there?
Well, it feels like quite a bit really. In the last sort of 12 months, we've been hit with every piece of regulation under the sun. Probably the key ones to talk about are the Zero Carbon Bill, the Indigenous Biodiversity proposal, and the Freshwater Essentials proposal. That's probably the one I'll focus on at the moment. That's looking at water quality and across all of the catchments. And there's a range of things that are going to be looked at. And I guess for our area, what I see as being possibly having an impact is talking about the requirement for fencing off of waterways, which is not easy in our hill country. But there are certainly different regulations for different slopes, etc., different quantities of water.
Mm-hmm.
The other part that's possibly going to have an effect of us is actually the testing of the water itself, and there's 4 tests that are going to be looked at: phosphorus, nitrogen, E. coli, and actual sediment levels. And I think the latter, the sediment levels, it could be a bit of a challenge for us. Of course, we don't really need a hell of a lot of rain for our rivers to turn pretty murky. So I guess that will be the challenge. But one thing that has happened just over the last couple of weeks is that the government, through the Provincial Growth Fund, have announced a fund of which will be available to farmers to pay up to 80 to 100% of costs involved with improving water quality.
Wow.
Which I see as really good news,
yes.
and a huge help. there is sort of a catch involved in that, like all things, nothing comes for free.
Yeah.
But there is, you need to be a part of a catchment group to obtain this funding,
Right.
and you need to be able to demonstrate that the money will also create extra employment. So I see local communities can pull together and possibly put together a catchment group, work on this together rather than just bashing away by yourself. And let's see first of all, let's understand what our water quality is actually like. A lot of us wouldn't know how much E. coli is in the water, how much sediment is actually in the water, or phosphorus or nitrogen. So let's start by testing and seeing exactly where we're playing from, and then start seeing what we can do to influence an outcome from there.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of testing, is that up to you to do, or do teams come in and do it?
Oh, yeah, look, there's a bit of work in progress to understand the detail of these things. I believe the regional council is going to be quite involved with this, but I mean, a lot of this stuff is only proposals at this stage as well, so nothing is firm, but there's no doubt that our government in Wellington are pushing pretty hard to really get some of these environmental regulations, I guess, over the line. So we've been through the submission stages on all those policies or proposals I mentioned. So that's sort of really, we're kind of in the mixer really. There's no doubt that that's the way that I guess we're going to have to go to really. So.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to wade through that paperwork first before you can actually and disseminate it and all of the information there, and then look at it step by step by step, I would imagine.
Well, the Freshwater Essentials proposal was something like 105 or 108 pages of lawyer jargon, as I call it, and there's no way I could decipher that. But the team down in Wellington, Federated Farmers, they're just experts at going through that kind of detail. They deciphered it, and then they can actually relay that back to us.
Right.
And sort of farmer terms or layman's terms, and then we can make something of it. So I guess that's one of the great benefits of being a member of Federated Farmers, is that you don't actually have to wade through the stuff yourself. And I wouldn't really recommend anyone do it actually, but get on board, be a member, and get the experts helping you, because it could be huge for you and your business, and hopefully the outcomes are a positive one.
Yeah. In terms of Federated Farmers, are you always encouraging people to join?
Oh, without doubt. Look, without doubt, at the end of the day, we're a sort of a member group, and as long as we're strong with our membership base, we've got more money to actually throw at these sorts of things in terms of litigation, and understanding more about them for the benefit of farmers. So it's sort of a strength in numbers sort of a thing, really. The membership fees are not massive, $500-600 or something from memory, but per annum. But yeah, I guess if we all band together and try and sort of pool our money, then I guess we all get benefits. So no, look, we're always looking for new members to be part of the team, and we're also encouraging people to come along to our meetings and voice opinions, concerns, questions. And we've got our next quarterly meeting is going to be on Wednesday, the 8th of July at 5 p.m. and that's on Manawatu Street in the St John's meeting rooms above the St John's room there. So we'd always encourage more people, new people, to come along, come and have a listen, and definitely throw your concerns out there, because from there we can take them as a group, myself and Luke Pepper, Gail Gray, the president and chairs. We can take that to Wellington or wherever it may be, but we sort of need the feedback, need the information from the floor to go and do something with it.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It really comes down, and you mentioned it before, strength in numbers, but it's having people there, having a directive in which way to go, and then you present that. And I think that's a good thing, because it does give people an opportunity to have their say, doesn't it?
Oh, that's it. Like, if you sort of, I guess if you don't say anything, well, nothing will get done. So always encourage it. Sometimes you won't get the most, you won't get the 100% outcome that you're looking for, but there's no harm in trying.
Right, so just remind us again, that meeting is Wednesday the 8th at 7:30?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. And it's in the St John's meeting room in Manawatu Street.
That's right. Correct. Yep, upstairs there. Typically we sort of discuss for an hour and a half and then try and have a bit of social time and go down to one of the local restaurants and have a bite together and, have a catch-up. So
that's the way to do it. Hey, Nick, it's been a pleasure talking with you. And I look forward to talking to you again in the very near future.
Really good. Thanks, Brian, and all the best to everyone out there through lambing, calving in the spring.
That was the King Country Rural Roundabout, brought to you by the Ruapehu Rural Support Trust. Phone 0800 787 254. Be listening same time next week for another edition of the King Country Rural Roundabout in association with the Ruapehu Rural Support Trust. Phone 0800 787 254 on the Trunk 88 FM. Homegrown right here in Taumarunui.